This actually, I can say, is my favorite panel. And I say that partially to prod the other moderators, but also because I think it's a really, really, really interesting topic in this space. And the reason for that is this is, I feel like influencers has emerged and is emerging as one of the big organic, sometimes not organic, new channels to use for mobile acquisition. And as other ad networks get saturated, finding those new channels is more and more important. We have assembled a great panel here that will provide multiple different perspectives. And I don't want to steal their thunder too much, but it's really good, right? We'll be looking at influencers internally and externally, and we'll go into more details about what that means. So I wanted to introduce the panel. You guys just feel free to raise your hand as we go through. We have Caitlin Lacey, and she is the Senior Director of User Acquisition and Experience at Snapette. We have Norman Liang. He is the VP of Growth and BD at Sungy Mobile. They're the makers of the Goel launcher app, which is actually pretty cool. We have Dmitri Williams. He is the CEO of Ninja Metrics, and he will talk about some really cool stuff. We have Vaibhav Goel. He's a product manager on the poker team at Zynga. And we have Jamal, he's multiple things. He's a product manager, a data scientist, corporate strategy at RockYou. So let's really quickly start by, you guys can say a little bit about yourself, maybe a few seconds about your background. Yeah.
Hi everyone, I'm really happy to be here. Excited to be here with all these panelists. So I helped to found Snapette actually 3 years ago. It was pretty soon after graduation, and I was really interested in the nexus between fashion and technology, and especially was really excited about the hyper-local space. I thought that there were lots of untapped opportunities in fashion and retail, specifically apps for women. So I was very lucky to find Snapette, which is co-founded by two amazing women. And yeah, so I've been there for 3 years and seen the growth from 0 to 3 million downloads. It's been really exciting.
Hi everyone, I'm Norm Liang. I head up monetization, growth, and partnerships. Most people haven't heard of Sungy Mobile, but most people have heard of our products. We make the Go series of apps. Today, we're about somewhere around 300 to 400 million installs now of our apps on Google Play, and we've done it without spending a dollar. It's been completely organic growth, and most of that has been because we found a lot of different channels. But in my world, I've done partnerships in mobile for a long time, ranging from preload deals with OEMs all the way out to features on the app stores and working with bloggers and influencers. And so along the way, I can tell you, if an OEM comes to you and says, I have a deal for you, that's the one deal you walk away from.
My name is Dmitri Williams. I'm CEO of Ninja Metrics. The other hat I wear is a professor at USC. That's my day job, which is less and less my day job. And I got into this while doing essentially paid work for the CIA. Non-creepy. It's work for the CIA, but we figured out while looking at network data, and especially a lot of data from game players, how to measure how the players were impacting each other. So we came up with a way of actually measuring influence and having it be, rather than whether they tweet, whether one person actually caused another person to spend more or play more. And that got really interesting really fast. And we now have about 300 million users go through our system. So when we talk about influence, it's provable, transparent type stuff. We're still figuring out what to do with it, to be honest. We'll talk about it today, for sure.
Hi everybody, I'm Vaibhav. I'm a product manager at Zynga. So I'm with the poker team, and right now I'm working on making poker more social, even though it's one of the most, the first social games out there. Just to give you a background, before joining Zynga, I started a gaming company, lived it for 4 years. So I'm basically a passionate gamer. So.
Hi, I'm Ali. Jamal. I work at RockYou. I kind of wear multiple hats at the company, focusing on product and analytics as well as a lot of our strategy and corporate development efforts as well. RockYou is a very interesting model where we tend to focus on long tail games and really continuing to manage and develop properties that have been around for a while. And so one of the things that we've noticed and that we've really keyed in on is the value that influencers have within the community and continuing to keep that community alive, and how do you continue to develop features and engage those players as they age in the system.
Great. Thanks again, guys, for agreeing to be on the panel. So the first question I have is about framing this. What is an influencer? What does that mean to you guys? I spoke with you guys off stage, and there are different perspectives. So would love to hear what you guys think is an influencer and how to utilize that as a Go channel. So I'm going to pick on Caitlin first.
Okay. So for us, an influencer is either a person or it could be a business in some cases that really moves the needle in terms of alerting and engaging a new audience of folks that would be enthusiastic about interacting with our product.
Can you give an example?
Sure. So I think there's some interesting, both B2B and B2C examples that we encountered. So Snapette really started off as a very hyper local business, as I initially said. So our app was really like the Foursquare for shopping. So our first task when we were starting the company was to, populate the content with great boutiques all around the world. And so the first thing that we had to do was really identify the boutiques that would move the needle in terms of convincing other boutiques that they needed to be on our platform. So instead of doing a broad appeal to tons of different businesses, what we did is we really researched and spent a ton of time understanding who are the most influential, which are the most influential boutiques in each of these different cities, and then spending 80% of our time just convincing them to come on our platform. And what we found is, after we found those businesses, their presence on Snapette became a signal to tons of other businesses in the area to come onto the app. So that's the B2B side. On the B2C side, it's really what I hope to talk about more later is the tastemakers. So we're a fashion mobile app, and so our job is really to identify the bloggers or celebrities that also signal to their audiences that this is a great app and really fun to use. So that's another way that we introduced growth.
Yeah, I agree. I'm going to give my perspective as well. So I think external influencers are a really interesting channel because there's a whole range of them. Right? There's Michelle Phan, who's a big celebrity now, organically grown, and then you have other celebrities like Kim Kardashian, who are celebrities, and those are huge growth channels that can drive a lot of users. Then, like Kevin was saying, you have boutiques, so smaller influencers that drive a lot of value, and I think that's interesting. Right? A lot of people won't necessarily be able to get Kim Kardashian to promote their app, but you can go to the churn out of boutiques and smaller players. So, anyone else?
I think one of the things that's important is that it's not just about the user acquisition that the influencers have, but also about their ability to continue to drive engagement within the app and the product. Right? So even though you've already acquired these users, understanding who within your portfolio is the one that continues to drive engagement, continues to bring people in, and it might not be in the most obvious ways, but it is still engaging and getting others to engage. I think is really important. A different way to think about it than just the typical user acquisition aspect of influencers.
I think I'll highlight also that, I think we take a different approach to it. For us, our influencers are actually our most passionate users. They're the ones that give us 5-star ratings of our apps. They're the ones that pull out their phones and show off the new features, and we make sure we reward them with all of the new features and make sure that they're the first ones to have them and talk about that, because that one person showing it to 5 friends is 5 new installs for us, and that's completely free. And those 5 installs we found have been way better than anything we've ever gotten through a paid channel. I can promote a tweet, and I can guarantee you that the the actual growth and retention I'll see and the churn I'll see, it's not going to compare. It's apples and oranges. The churn is going to be tremendously high from any user that I buy versus all of these users that are coming through this organic install simply by them having seen the product or having a friend who uses the product who can help them use the product, because we probably make one of the most complicated products in all of Android. But I guess I'll also say that you guys might have heard of, I mean, how many people have actually heard of Go Launcher? How many people have heard of Facebook Home? So we started this category about 3 years ago, specifically with the idea that users could take an Android phone and make it look like an iPhone. And that was really the basic part of the idea. Just giving some users some control. It wasn't about social, it wasn't about what your friends were doing, it wasn't about seeing the latest tweets or being able to tweet or share something. It was purely about giving users control. And that led to the growth of a category that today, has in Android is probably the fastest growing category across the board, simply allowing users the flexibility to control that. And we have to make sure that the influencers, the bloggers, and everybody else around that really stay intimately involved with that, because it's their word of mouth that drives our growth, that gets people to go into our Google Play page to go look at the app, go through those screenshots, and then actually download and install that.
I've got a entirely different perspective on this. While my colleagues up here tend to be...
I love different perspectives.
There you go.
That's great.
We're going to fight. We're going to throw bananas at each other after the pin. Well, a lot of people think about influencers as the more celebrity sort of branding, who's going to see my stuff and then talk about it and tweet about it. When I ran into this space as a data scientist, I was personally mathematically offended by that, because I can't prove it, I can't touch it. And if I'm spending money against it, I know something good is happening and I see general patterns. But where we see influence mathematically happening in social graph stuff is at the local level. It's at friends, it's girlfriends, it's coworkers, it's dorm mates. And that's where it's provable, and those small amounts of influence add up to be a very large amount of the revenue pie overall. So for me, the definition of an influencer is when she stops buying, her friend stops buying. That's the proof, and therefore I can label it and I can act against it. If I can't prove it, I don't want to mess with it.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I think we as a gaming company, traditionally we have identified VIPs as somebody who pays in a game and who generates the revenue. But I think when we think of influencers, they are a subset of these guys, and they may not generate revenue, but they create value in terms of engagement or influencing their friends. So I think that is what we're focusing on. And when we talk about external and internal, so we think of identifying influencers internally using in-game actions. And when we talk of external, it's more about, hey, looking at the whole Zynga player network and seeing, hey, how are these people connected to other players in the Zynga network who even reactivate people or acquire users from the different games. So that's what it is from our perspective.
Great. So I think you guys have given a bunch of different perspectives. We know now, you guys, what the power is of influencers, and a little bit about how you guys find them. But I want to push harder on that one, because I think that's where it's relevant for the crowd. How do you, we'll start with you, Caitlin. How do you find the influencers? How do you determine which are the right ones? And let's start with there before I get to my follow-up question. And
Sure.
because, for example, external, there's a whole bunch of different things. So what's been your approach to determine who you use, who you target?
Yeah. So I just want to clarify first by saying that, of course our approach was never just uniquely external. We did have an ongoing internal friend referral system, which we tried to encourage, but what we were really looking for is a big scale user acquisition strategy that we were, happy to invest some funds into. So we started to look into celebrities. This was back in 2012 when I think this is pre-Kim Kardashian app, right? And this is, I think only Justin Bieber had sponsored Shops app or something. So there wasn't many examples of celebrities being super involved in mobile apps, but looking at some celebrities like Jessica Alba, for instance, you can really see how, when they back a business, it can have tremendous success with the right demographic. So the approach that we had actually was just to reach out to CAA, which is the big agency that represents a lot of these celebrities. And they really help you to negotiate any partnerships that you might have with someone. That could be like a cash deal or an equity deal. CAA also gets a cut, so they're really your friend in this. They're like very interested in making an opportunistic deal for everyone. So the way that it worked is like we got this big packet of all the celebrities that they represented, everyone from like 50 Cent to Madonna, and we just went around the office, like all of us checking off who we thought would be a good brand ambassador for us. And then kind of tallied that up, got back to CAA. And then what they do on their end is like try to sell your idea to different celebrities. And so we were able to get Emma Roberts interested. She's Julia Roberts' niece, and we really felt that her demographic aligned well with ours. And that's super important because you have to keep in mind that these are the people that are going to start using your app and reacting to it and writing the app reviews. And so make sure that it's like, if it's the 15-year-old girls that are super excited about a Nickelodeon star, like make sure that's your demographic as well. But yeah, and then from there, we were able to work with Emma. We had a 1-year contract with her, and the contract really specified like a media day in which she talked about the app to press, and then consistent interaction with our app and also social media posting. And then we also worked with actually the world's top fashion blogger, Chiara Ferragini of the Blonde Salad. That was sort of a different approach. That was really interesting because bloggers are fantastic for retail. Like, I think Chiara is responsible for 10% of Burberry's sales internationally. So we were really excited to work with her. And again, you contact them through next models and negotiate a deal. But I think the important thing to keep in mind here is like, unlike maybe like your Facebook install campaign or something like an advertising network, like working with celebrities and bloggers, they're people, right? And they also have their own brands to protect, their celebrity brand. And so it's really important on your end to make like a very convincing case of why they should be excited about your product and how it will improve their standing as a brand as well.
We find influencers through algorithms, which sound incredibly boring, but I assure you are dead sexy. So if you're looking at this social graph of people and you see that this guy with the box hat in the front row, if he buys a movie ticket or he buys a pair of shoes, or I don't know who you are, so I'm sorry to pick on you, but let's assume you're this influencer, then your friends should buy after you do. That's the proof of it. And then when you stop, they should stop. And what that lets you do is to think about your LTV differently than everybody else's. It lets you start to claim other people's LTV. So you're not coming up with new dollars. You're attributing them cause and effect for people who actually are the followers that they cascaded out from you, or you that you're responsible for some of their spend. And so therefore, in mass, you're going to be able to say how much of my money is coming from the product, how much is coming from social, and which people. And the people who naturally have more of this social value, that we call it, they'd be the whales, or we call them social whales. And so it's just a math distribution. And we find that about 10% of the people have about 60% of this influence power once you add it all up. So interestingly, it's a different group of people than the big spenders. So it's not as simple as just who are my whales, I'll just figure they're influential. If you think about your group of friends, forget the math for a minute, you've got a bunch of friends, some of them are influential, some of them are big spenders, and there's only a little Venn diagram overlap between those people. And that's what we see consistently over and over across many millions of users. So it's fascinating to find somebody who in a game or an app spends $0 or $5 but causes $5,000 of spending, right? And then when they stop, that ripple stops. That's how we define it, measure it, and keep proving that.
Yeah, and I think we, being a data-driven company, we follow a similar approach. So just to give you an example, we do like Community Blast, where you click on this, you get X number of chips, or you invite your friend, you get X numbers of chips. So a simple project that we did was, hey, we looked at our Twitter handle and we saw there are, say, 100 followers. Now, how do we incentivize and identify influencers in that? So we try to implement a social network theory, which is effectively all these players in your network are nodes, and they're connected, and they follow each other, or they interact with each other. Once you have this full network, you implement algorithms like network centrality and eigenvector centrality, and it's basically a Google page rank kind of a system where these influencers pop out. And if you incentivize these people, it's more probable for your content to go viral. So that's the approach that we took, and the results that we got were pretty good. This was more from an external point of view because we're not looking at in-game actions. For our network inside the game, what we do is we track a lot of, we track every action in Zynga games, right? And some of those actions are social interactions. And the way the model would work is to try to identify value and weigh each of these social actions, and again try to influence, trying to find influences from these models, and then incentivize those people to again interact with their friends using these actions. So it's the whole point. The whole point is to identify what social actions in your game are driving engagement, and then focus on people who are actually driving those engagements. So that's basically what we do in game versus external.
Okay. I guess I would just say, I guess right now, I mean, there is no sort of magic black box solution. You can't really just sort of enter in a bunch of parameters and then out comes this magic list of influencers.
I strongly disagree.
Can you buy it?
Yes. See me after.
Or can you build it? Or do you have to build it?
Good luck.
So if you were to build it, like how many people would it take?
About 25 people, about 10 years. A lot of research funding.
Research funding. So how does the data set get shared? I mean, how does this populate across other apps? So we as app developers, and those of us who are app developers, we have very singular dimensions of users. We have the dimensions of the users that we have because, right, it's sort of the app ecosystem is federated.
That's a very different question. It's a business model question, not a science question, right? So I go to, e-commerce shoe company X, and then I go to Zynga or game company B, and I can tell them, here are your influencers, here are your influencers. Do they want to share data with each other to say unified data set? Because that data set becomes really valuable. And they've got all kinds of opt-in reservations and business model questions. And so if those are rivalrous companies, they're probably not going to share detailed data. Maybe they share some kind of abstracted thing. Then you've got privacy issues and concerns. Let's just say that's not an easy lift to do it on a consortium, big database-wide model. That's the long-term goal, and I think everybody in this room would love to hit that data set. But let's talk in a few years, right?
Is it repeatable though? I mean, I think that influencers will be experts in one section or passionate about one, for example, one type of game. That doesn't necessarily mean that that would translate to other games within your network or other. So
well, some of it does. Some people are extroverts and their influence is fungible, right? It doesn't matter what they're talking about. Other people, it's specific. This is for the nerds in the room. This is transaction memory system theory. This is whether or not you've got a friend who is an expert in politics, and so you send that guy the email on the politics story because they're like the reservoir for you. And you go back to them when it's time to ask about the politics question. Likewise, you've got a girlfriend who knows the spas or knows the shoes or knows the whatever, and so it can't be categorical. There are different types of people.
Can it be standardized?
Yeah. That's been.
People want it to be.
Well, we standardize based on dollars, so it's people like that.
All right, so let's do this a little bit. I think this is great. Maybe I'll chime in. So if you are a team of one, you're just getting started with influencers, what do? And you can start with exactly what you guys are talking about, and then external ones as well. So have at it. Whoever wants to talk about how you can start it with a team of one.
That's tough.
I can talk about externally what some of the approaches that we had when we had very few funds. Here's what I don't recommend. Going onto YouTube and just like messaging every person that you think is an influencer, right? Like that will take up weeks of your time. Similarly, like what I hear time and again is, folks who say like, blogging, I'm going to approach bloggers and that's going to be my user acquisition channel for sure. And then, like again, a month later, you have like an Excel spreadsheet of 2,000 people who have a blog. And you sent out 2,000 emails and gotten all these like various responses of expectations for payment, right? So I think what we did that was successful, that was a good use of our time when we didn't have money to spend, was understanding like which platforms in terms of social actually move the needle for us, right? So we did our own social media postings and really tested pretty diligently week to week. And for us, like, it was Instagram. Instagram by far had the highest ROI in terms of leading to downloads, and that was opposed to like Facebook and Pinterest and Twitter. So when it came time later for us to work out a contract with a celebrity about like number of posts she would do, we didn't waste time having her post on Twitter or Pinterest because we had already done that late work of understanding like where users were really reacting to. So yeah.
Was that repeated over time though? I would assume that you'd have different penetrations with different social mediums, right? So I would assume that the third post on Instagram might not have the same ROI as the first post would, and I would assume that after a while, the 25th post on Instagram would probably have a lower ROI than Facebook or Twitter.
So you mean with the celebrity in particular? Yeah, so I think there's definitely a risk of oversaturation for sure. I mean, I think one thing to keep in mind is that there's also like a pretty rapid rate of growth of following on these celebrity Instagram accounts. So you do need to space out accordingly, and definitely like the celebrity will also be like very sensitive to oversaturation. They definitely don't want to seem salesy or inauthentic to their base. But no, what we really found was that we continue to have like, if not increasing, at least like stable growth with our posts.
There's some best practices to follow. However you decided that's an important person, that's not. I think the thing that brands and companies have a hard time wrapping their heads around is that it's not about the relationship between you as the brand and the customer, the influencer. That's the least important part of the equation. The most important part of the equation is the link between the influencer and their friends. And so if you're just saying, here's a coupon for you, that's great, that's a start, and maybe it'll ripple out. But if you can speak to the relationship or the experience between those two friends, that's where you're going to get the lift. So if you're running a spa and you found your influencer, okay, great, give her a discount. But if you can come up with, let's have girls' night at the spa, and here's a promotion for you and your 3 friends, now you're hitting the actual funnel mechanism which is driving the influence. You want to come up with promotions and mechanisms that, of course, retain and monetize people, but that ultimately strengthen their friendships. Because you're just a way for them to enjoy each other's friends. You're not the important part of it. And as soon as you get your head around that, they're going to be happier with each other, they're going to have a better time, and oh, by the way, you're going to make more money. But that's the end, that's not the start.
I think also part of that is that you have to realize what rewards an influencer actually does want. I don't think it's always necessarily rewards for themselves as much as it is the recognition of being an expert or having the latest technology and things of that nature. So I think one of the things that we noticed even from a gaming perspective is that a lot of times players would rather give out gifts rather than go and ask people for gifts. They would want to be seen as the person that has that social cachet, that they have that ability to help out other people and get rewarded for that rather than having to go around asking for help.
Can the audience chime in at this moment? Looks like a great discussion. Can't wait to
Sure, always.
Dmitri, what you just said.
You might have to speak up really loud because we don't have
I'm sorry.
that
This is to Dmitri's comment. The point that you made, a great point. Shouldn't that also work for whether he or she is a celebrity or a non-celebrity? If you care about a person's connections, not connection between you and that so-called influencer, it doesn't matter whether that influencer has 100 friends or 1,000 friends. That formula, that approach should work for everybody.
Well, so let me tee up Caitlin for this. She's probably a better person to answer it. It's about the relationship between the two people, right? And so in the broadcast model where you found Kim Kardashian and she has 8 zillion followers and there's an implied relationship, but they don't really know each other. It's what we call parasocial, if you want to drop the 10-cent word into it. That's very different than the 3 friends and you found the influencer and the 3 friends. You can be much more specific with, here's a racetrack for you and your 2 friends in a virtual racing game. Kim Kardashian's not going to call all those people, but they probably assume there's a relationship there, and so you can, like, what's the relationship between Kim and Fan 2000X? I don't know the right lever to pull for that, but if you found her and you found those 2,000 people, then what do you do?
Yeah, so I think another point that is is really important to consider is like, we experienced this when we worked like first with a celebrity who actually had way more followers, like 10 times more followers at least than the blogger that we worked with. What we found is actually working with a blogger was a little bit more successful in terms of finding the right demographic of engaged users. And the reason is that, you know, you might be a fan of a celebrity for who knows how many reasons. Like you might think they're hot, or like you really love this character that they played in some random movie, right? Like, so there's all these reasons why people follow like a celebrity in particular. But I think bloggers are, especially fashion bloggers, or maybe a blogger that's specific to your space, act as sort of like a best friend or a tastemaker in the case that Dmitri keeps pointing to. These are people that like followers are specifically going to their site to find out like what to buy and where to go and what's cool, right? Like they're the tipping points kind of like interest. So when you find people, this engaged audience and people specifically going to her website or her Instagram to find out like what's the cool new thing, that's where we found like much better engagement over time.
Just wanted to add on your question of what if you don't have a lot of resources. So just want to share a quick story which we did for a school project. And the idea was, hey, there's a small pizza shop and they wanted to target their competitors, how to attract more customers. So all we did was we looked at the Twitter handle of their competition and ran the social network analysis and identified top influencers. Some of those influencers were bloggers who talked about pizza shops in that particular locality. And as this small pizza shop which approached us, we said, hey, just go to those bloggers, give them discounts, give them referral bonuses. And they did that, and within like a month or so, all the bloggers were actually talking about this new pizza shop. So, and it was really cheap for us because Twitter information is public and you can run, use open source softwares to actually identify these influencers. So if you just want to give it a try, if it's like really easy to go out there and try it, obviously you need companies like Metrics if you have like terabytes of data and you want to build models. But if you are like a single person and trying to identify, hey, who's the influencer in my industry, it's a really simple analysis.
Question. So I'm so agree. Oh, I'm very agree with beautiful girl what you said. Forget really. Professor. So like you have all that study about algorithm, like where you have that who are the most influential people in that certain industry. But how do you get all that data from all those people? And do you have the monetization plan for all that? So we are 40,000 influencer community that we have a lot of bloggers and gamers in our community, and actually we have clients, they are buying from us. So I was wondering, like, if there's some sort of combination that you can suggest us what we do. We have big data system, all that to understand how those people are doing. So
I just want to say, like, you know, at the end of the day, this is about influencers and partnerships. This is about going in with a goal, a defined goal. We've talked a lot about the qualitative way to define that goal, and we've talked a lot about the quantitative way to define that goal. So it's quality versus quantity, right? You have to go in with that set of metrics to try to figure out like, what's your goal. If my goal is to drive installs, obviously it's about quantity. Mm-hmm. I can measure that. If it's about quality, it gets more into the line of, I think, where Dmitri's going with, from a quality perspective, there's this relationship between the influencer and the user. And there's a mathematical score you can assign to that. And ultimately, right, I think everybody's talking about, you know, optimizing their campaign ROI goals and talking about LTVs and things like that. In simple math, it's literally just, is this a profitable user or not?
So I'm going to try to riff on that and answer your question at the same time. For anyone who didn't hear, I think the question was basically, do we have the right data? Where do we start to do this kind of thing? What data do we look at to build up these kinds of systems? Is that a fair paraphrase?
Or do you guys have any sort of plan to monetize that? All that data, yes, all that.
So first you need social data. And this is where half the people in the room are going to be really sad that they don't have it, right? So if you've got social sign-in for your site, Google+, Facebook, whatever, then you can glom onto a social graph right there. If you're in the game industry, you're already done because people play socially, so you're there. So you have to marry the social graph data with in-game behavior data or in-app behavior data, and then you can do these kinds of things. Then what do you do with it, and how do you get to the more sort of hard side of it? You A/B test against it. But when you A/B test with social influencers, you now are measuring virality by definition. So if guy with box hat here, sorry, you must have a real name. What's your name? Daniel here is my influencer, and I do something with him. I want to look at 10,000 Daniels and then 10,000 Bobs, and I want to try promotion A and promotion B. And great, I want to see what happens with Daniel and Bob, but I want to see the ripple effect out on their friends. And if I've tried A and B, and I'm driving them with two different kinds of hypotheses, like maybe it's about the pay it forward kind of promotion, Ali said, and maybe it's about more of a self-centered thing, which has the better ripple. And so now you're A/B testing, and you're not really caring about Bob and Daniel's spending. You want to see the spread and the reality out from it. And that's how you start to come back to, okay, what worked and why. And you get that more qualitative part. So there's no disentangling the math from the qualitative part, but this is to bore the hell out of everybody. This is why we teach theory in classes.
Yeah, I really like what you said. There's a the relationship will be strengthened after that. But how do you measure that, strengthen that relationship? Is there any math we can do that?
Yeah, I mean, I would really want to speak to some of the centrality type scores for.
Yeah, so there is you can go to Wikipedia and look up the social network theory, right?
Social
all
what?
that theory talks about social network, social network analysis. So all that analysis is about identifying this network, which will have nodes, which are effectively people in the network, and then you define edges which connect these nodes. And it's up to you how you define those edges. So if you have a Facebook network, for example, say all of these guys are my friends. So we are all nodes and we are connected because we're friends with each other. But if Dmitri and I, we engage a lot, we'll have a much stronger connection. And based on this, you can score everybody. So the influencer will not be the guy who has the most number of connections. He'll be the guy who's connected to people who are connected to more people. So that is how it works. So it's something like a Google PageRank system.
Is that something similar to cloud? So some clouds do use that to measure.
I think you guys have to repeat the question.
The question was, isn't that similar to cloud? And I shuddered, so no. Cloud is based on, you tweet and you have a lot of followers, and so you assume that that person is influential. And then they retweet and they retweet. But at no point in a system that's based on Twitter does it actually tie back to in-app actions. And so you can't prove it. And that's why it drives me bananas.
Does those, sorry, too much question. But does that game tracking SDK can track those LTV to become the measurement of that strengthened relationship?
I think the question was, are you tracking the right things in the app to reinforce this algorithmic approach?
If we define the LTV will be the goal for, like the in-game spending or that, so will that be the better measurement?
So you're asking is LTV the right KPI?
I break LTV out into asocial and social values. So it separates this, and that way you can do causal arrows for influence. If it's glommed together, you can't, but I purposely split them. That's how our algorithm works.
So I want to hear from the rest of the panel about this as well. We've talked about influencers, and we've started touching on KPIs. We've got one perspective on LTV, component, for you specifically, components that make up LTV, and you roll in social. Are there other KPIs that people are looking at, or maybe what is the one key KPI you guys are looking at when you think of influencers? And then I'll give my perspective.
Yeah, I'll start. So, I think going back to this idea of how do you approach this question in your very, very early stage? An easy, gut reaction is okay, our KPIs are going to be, LTV or installs or time spent in the app, all these different metrics for engagement, post-download. I think what we really came to believe, though, is that your main KPI should be whatever it indicates the proof of concept of your business. So identify what is the action within the app that your user is taking. It doesn't necessarily matter how much time they're spending in the app or how much they're monetizing for you at a very early stage, but what is it that they're doing inside the app that proves that your product is valuable or interesting to them. So for us, when we were working with celebrities or influencers, we really tried to structure promotions such that there was some kind of follow through after the install that specifically guided users to experience, the thing that we were offering them.
I guess for us, it's just depends on the segment of users that we're looking for. So it's about, we break it down into new users, engaged users, and disengaged users, and try to focus on, and try to give ourselves periods of time to focus on one particular segment. Because yes, we're not a sole developer, but if it were me on my own, I have to pick and choose, right? I only have so many hours in the day. We heard someone talk about work-life balance earlier. You know, as a developer, as someone working, you know, on your own, you've just got to pick and choose and prioritize because you can't do everything. And so you really got to double down and just set some timelines for yourself and say, okay, so I'm going to focus right today or this week. My tactics are going to focus on my new user growth, or my engaged user growth, or my churned user re-engagement. And I think we're still moving beyond that. And when I approach partnerships, I'm looking for channels where, you know, I'm finding the relationship or defining the relationship between these segments of users and my goals. And then that's how I prioritize spending my time.
Yeah, sure. Being a product manager at Zynga, we deal with KPIs on a daily basis. So the way we do is it's effectively A/B testing. So say you have identified a group of influencers and you are incentivizing them to take game actions. So we define something called a social score in the game, which is effectively based on any social action that you take in the game. So for example, in poker, you can sit at a table, you can give table gifts, and you can share gifts and chips and all that stuff. So any social action has a weight assigned to it, and which contributes to the social score of that particular person. It also includes how many friends you have, how many poker buddies you have. So that will be your KPI if we are trying to figure out, hey, if we incentivize influencers in this particular group, the overall average social score of this cohort will be more than what we are currently in activity control. So that is what we look at.
You know, I think for us, because we're managing older games, and I think one of the things that's different is that it's not just about, it's about how you calculate LTV, or what you think LTV is, and how you define it. I think a lot of people, you know, call it LTV, but actually only look at the first 90 days or the first 180 days. And, you know, we have games out there that have been around for 5-6 years. So, you know, there's really is that aspect to it that you can continue to have revenue from older customers even after, and influencers even after the initial first few days. But I think part of that is also not just the digital goods revenue, but also for us a large portion of it comes from ads, and you know, keeping DAU as a driver and keeping them engaged in their actions within the game, but also their ability to drive revenue from multiple sources besides just digital good revenue, I think is really important for us.
So I really like these perspectives. I'll add my own, which I agree with you, is that if you're using, so there's some influencer channels which are harder to measure the ROI, right? If someone does a tweet, you know, you can see what was the uplift in installs from the day before. That's one way to measure it. Oftentimes you're not going to capture everything. I would recommend that you don't, at least in that case, you don't just look at installs, particularly if you're an app that has had a lot of historical downloads. Look at re-engagement or increases in engagement, which is essentially older users that may have lapsed out coming back. And that's where you'll be capturing, or at least measuring and recognizing the value of an external tweet or blast or something, or an Instagram post. Because I think what's important to everyone here is that if you're going to use influencers as a growth tactic or channel, you want to make the right decision. So if it is ROI positive, but you're measuring it, it's not ROI positive because you haven't captured all the levers of value, then you might erroneously stop using that influencer tactic. Of course. So, but we have about 1 minute.
I'll riff quickly. Because attribution tags now exist, there's no reason you can't take a score like mine or the one that Vaibhav mentions. Anything that says in your app or product that says this person is influential, go back to the UA source and see if it's systematically different by source. And so are you getting dollar for dollar, or are some people more or less valuable than they appear to be based on the publisher channels? We started doing this 2 months ago for the first time, and we're seeing about a 20 to 40% variance on the ROI. Like, you think it's worth this, it's worth this, or it's worth this. It's like, boom. And we never even thought to do it. But now that the tags are there and the data are starting to become clean, you can do this stuff. And you have a huge advantage in understanding what someone's actual value is and what channel is actually paying off and which are sadly not as good as they seem to be.
Yes, I agree as well. I think these are all great run out of time and also catch up with the summit. So I want to first, let's give these guys a big round of applause, but if you want to comment, and if you want to speak to them further, I believe some of them will be sticking around and you can harass them. All right, thanks everyone.